A heart does not choose its moment, it chooses its truth. Sally's hands wouldn't stop shaking. The soft morning light slipped through the blinds of her tiny apartment, near Georgia State, touching the pregnancy test resting in her palm. Two bold lines stared back at her. Her breath stuttered, and for a moment it felt as if the room shrank around her. She pressed her free hand against her chest, as if it could slow the rush of fear, joy, and disbelief twisting inside her. 21 years old, barely out of school, still searching for her place in Atlanta. And now this. A knock at the door broke the silence. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Not yet. Her whisper barely rose above a breath. Lord, how am I supposed to tell him? The door finally opened with the familiar beep of Brad's key. He stepped inside, the man she had grown to love with a depth she never expected. 49 years old, powerful to the world, gentle with her. He walked toward her with that quiet ease she always admired. "Sally, you all right?" he asked, noticing her pale face and tear-rimmed eyes. She couldn't speak. Not at first. She simply held up the test. His steps faltered. His voice cracked. What is that?" Her throat tightened. She forced the words out. "Brad, I'm pregnant." The world seemed to freeze around him. He staggered back a step, gripping the edge of her counter as if the truth might slip from his grasp. His breath hitched, his eyes wide and glassy. The man who once commanded boardrooms found his knees giving out beneath him as he sank to the floor. "That's impossible," he whispered. He wasn't angry. He wasn't cold. He was shattered by a miracle he'd been told would never exist. And Sally stood there watching the man she loved crumble under the weight of a truth that would change both of their lives forever. Brad's breath trembled as he stared at the floor, the shock still swallowing him whole. Sally didn't move. She couldn't. Her hands hovered in the air as if she needed permission to keep breathing. For a moment, neither of them spoke. And then the camera shifts, not to them, but to the audience, to every heart listening. Have you ever received news that shook your world so completely? You didn't know whether to cry, fall, or run. A moment where joy and fear crashed together so fast you couldn't tell which one to trust. A moment where the life you planned stepped aside for the life you never expected. Because that's where Sally was standing. That's where Brad was drowning. And that's the place so many viewers have been. The crossroads where one truth rewrites everything. Sally swallowed hard, steadying herself. Her voice broke as she whispered, "I didn't plan this, I didn't expect this. But, Brad, this is real." And while her words were meant for him, every listener could feel them too. That trembling honesty, that fear of losing someone, because life delivered a surprise too heavy to carry alone. Brad lifted his head slowly, his eyes searching Sally's face, trying to understand how a truth this big could find them both at once. His lips parted, but no words came out. Not yet. Sally stepped back, her fingers trembling at her sides. Because she already knew what the world would say. A 21-year-old black woman. A 49-year-old white billionaire. A pregnancy neither of them planned. People would tear it apart before they even understood it. Whispers would follow her name. Judgment would chase her steps. And the one wound she feared most would come from the man kneeling in front of her. She could hear the accusations already, not from him, but from everyone watching their lives from the outside. She trapped him. She planned it. He's too old. She's too young. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "Brad, I know what people are going to think, and I know what that letter said." His eyes lifted sharply. Because Sally had seen it, that clinic report, tucked inside a drawer in his office, the one that claimed he would never father a child. And now the question pressed silently between them. If the world didn't believe this miracle, would he? The room felt smaller, the tension heavier. Not anger. Fear. Fear that love might not be enough to carry a truth this life-changing. And fear that the one man who made her feel safe might suddenly doubt her when she needed him most. Brad rose slowly from the floor, not fully standing, not fully recovered, just enough to reach for her hand. His voice was faint, almost uncertain. "Sally, what does this mean for us?" The question hung between them like a fragile thread. Because this wasn't just a pregnancy. It was a challenge to everything they'd been told, Everything people assumed, everything society judged before hearing their truth. A young woman with her whole future ahead of her. A man who had made peace with never being a father. A life growing between them that defied every medical word ever spoken over him. Sally's breath unsteady, she whispered back, "I don't know, Brad. But I want to find out with you. The story could go anywhere from here. Love, doubt, conflict, trust, heartbreak, healing. But one thing was certain. Their lives were about to collide with forces neither of them ever expected. Family. Opinions, buried fears, old medical records, and a miracle that refused to be ignored. And so the narrator turns to the viewer. Stay with me until the end, because this miracle didn't just change 2 lives, it rewrote families, challenged stereotypes, and shattered every expectation in its way. What began with shock would end with a truth none of them saw coming. The air in the apartment felt still, almost heavy, as Brad finally stood upright. He wasn't angry. He wasn't distant. He was overwhelmed by fear, by hope, and by the memory of every doctor who told him fatherhood was something he would never touch. But Sally didn't know which emotion would reach him first. She held her breath as he stepped closer, his hands shaking more than hers. "Sally, this means more than you know," he whispered. His voice broke once before he steadied it. "But I need you to hear something." Her heart pounded. This was climax 1. The moment everything hinged on. He reached out, touching her face gently, his thumb brushing away the tear she didn't realize had fallen. "I'm not running," he said. "I'm grateful." Shocked, but grateful. Relief crashed through her, sharp and warm. But fate wasn't done with them yet, because climax 2 waited quietly in their future, a moment neither of them could foresee. Some weeks later, Sally would open a drawer in Brad's office, looking for a misplaced charger, and her fingers would land on a folded white envelope. The ink inside would echo every warning he'd ever received. Low fertility probability. Natural conception unlikely. The paper would slip from her fingers. Her breath would vanish. Her knees would weaken. And all the fear she swallowed today would rise again tomorrow. Does he believe this miracle is real? Does he believe me? That second breaking point, that silent question, would threaten everything they were building. But what they would do with that moment would define the rest of their story. 2 emotional collisions. 2 turning points. 1 love tested in ways neither expected. And now, bestie, with the hook complete, the story is ready to begin. South Atlanta had a rhythm that lived inside Sally's bones. The hum of neighbors greeting each other across porches, the smell of collard greens drifting from her grandmother's kitchen on Sundays, the choir rehearsing at the small church she grew up in. At 21, Sally still carried all of it in her smile. She lived with purpose, even in the simplest moments. Her mornings began with the soft buzz of her alarm, the warm Atlanta sun sneaking through her curtains, and a reminder on her phone. That said, "You're building something." That phrase wasn't just motivation, it was how she survived every doubt, every whisper that tried to shrink her dreams. Fresh out of college, she held on to one vision, creating an education app that could help underserved students in Atlanta learn through tech tools they normally didn't have access to. It wasn't just a business idea to her, it was personal, born from watching cousins struggle in overcrowded classrooms. Her internship downtown was the first real step. The pay wasn't much, but the access was everything. It gave her a badge, a desk, and a chance to watch how real tech companies operated. Every day, she scribbled notes in a worn notebook about UX design, community outreach, and leadership skills. She believed the world could be changed through technology, not the flashy kind, but the kind that reached actual people. Her parents adored her ambition. Her mother always said, "Baby, your gift isn't loud, it's steady." Her father taught her discipline and integrity. Her grandmother taught her resilience through faith. All of them poured into her the confidence she carried when she walked into every room. She had no idea that her life, rooted so deeply in South Atlanta's warmth, was about to collide with a world she had never imagined entering, a world of private jets, gala dinners, and wealth so vast it felt unreal. But for now, she was just Sally, a young black woman with big dreams, steady hands, and a heart ready for purpose. Buckhead was beautiful, But to Brad, it often felt quiet in a way that didn't comfort him. His mansion rested behind high gates, surrounded by neat hedges and perfect landscaping. The house looked impressive from the outside, but on most nights, he walked through it like a guest rather than the owner. At 49, he had more money than he ever dreamed of. His business success built him a global reputation, a respected entrepreneur, philanthropist, investor. People admired him everywhere he went. Yet admiration never softened an empty home. Years ago, he loved someone deeply, his ex-wife. Their marriage survived boardroom stress, cross-country travel, and public attention. What it couldn't survive was the heartbreak of infertility. The fertility clinic letter he kept wasn't just a medical note. It was the symbol of every hope he lost. The day the doctor said natural conception was unlikely, something in him dimmed quietly. His wife eventually left, not out of malice but exhaustion. Afterward, he buried himself in work. He funded schools, donated to tech programs, supported community innovation. Giving filled some of the space inside him, but not all. Every woman he met afterward left him cautious. Their interest came too quickly, their intentions unclear. Wealth was a magnet, and not always the good kind. So Brad lived guarded, polite, generous, distant. He told himself that fatherhood was not meant for him. He accepted it, or tried to. When he looked out from his balcony at the Buckhead skyline, he didn't feel powerful. He felt unfinished, as if something essential to his story had never arrived. That emptiness would shift the moment he crossed paths with Sally, a stranger, with bright eyes who had no idea who he was, and no interest in his money. A stranger who made him feel seen for the first time in years. The downtown tech innovation fair buzzed with energy. Young entrepreneurs hurried between booths, presenters adjusted microphones, and bright posters covered every surface. Sally was volunteering that morning, juggling cables, organizing displays, and helping young creators set up their prototypes. She was carrying a stack of poster boards taller than her torso when they began tilting dangerously. She tried adjusting her grip, but the boards were seconds from crashing to the ground. A steady hand caught the top board. "Let me help you with that," a calm voice said behind her. Sally looked up and met a pair of warm, steady eyes. Brad stood there in a simple suit, no entourage, no introduction, just a man offering kindness. She didn't know him, didn't recognize him as the sponsor of the event, didn't connect him to the name printed on every banner. They shifted the boards together onto a nearby table. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, a little flustered but grateful. "Thank you," she said softly. "No problem," he replied with a gentle smile. "Looks like you've been doing the heavy lifting around here." Something in his tone made her laugh, not a forced laugh, but a genuine one she hadn't felt much lately. "Occupational hazard," she joked. They talked for a moment, short, simple, natural. He asked about her internship, she spoke about helping organize the fair. He listened closely, genuinely. There was no flirtation, no pretense, just a quiet spark neither of them tried to name. Before they could speak further, an event coordinator rushed over. "Mr. Hayes, you're up in 5. Brad nodded, giving Sally an apologetic smile. She froze for a split second. "Mr. Hayes?" She watched him walk toward the stage, realization spreading slowly. She had just shared a moment with the CEO, the very man everyone was buzzing about, without knowing it. And somehow that made it even more meaningful. Sally stepped to the back of the crowd as Brad took the stage. He spoke with confidence but not arrogance. He spoke about mentorship, community growth, and investing in people rather than just products. His voice carried warmth, not superiority. Watching him up there, she felt a flicker of disbelief. "That's the man who helped me with posters?" When his speech ended, applause filled the room. Most CEOs would have shaken hands with investors or rushed to the next appointment. Brad walked off the stage and went straight back to her. "You didn't tell me you were running the show," she teased lightly. "You didn't tell me you were the most interesting person here," he countered, half smiling. She felt her face warm. No man had spoken to her like that, gently, without agenda. They talked again, this time longer. He asked about her education app idea, and she explained it with excitement. He listened as if he wasn't a billionaire and she wasn't an intern, Just two people connecting over honest conversation. For that moment, the noise of the fair faded around them. As the event wound down, Brad hesitated for a brief moment, not out of uncertainty, but because he wanted to approach her respectfully. "I'd like to hear more about your project," he said. "Maybe over coffee sometime?" Sally blinked, surprised by how calm he sounded, and by how calm she felt saying yes. They exchanged numbers, simple, natural, unforced. When he walked away, she let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her heart fluttered, but not out of fear, out of recognition. Something rare had begun. Brad stepped outside the venue, glancing once at her number saved in his phone. For the first time in years, he smiled without forcing it. Neither of them understood the magnitude of that moment yet. But that small exchange, quiet, unassuming, honest, was the very beginning of a story that would reshape both of their lives. Their first coffee meeting was supposed to be short, 30 minutes, maybe 40. Just enough time for Brad to hear more about Sally's education app idea. But once they sat down at the small cafe in Midtown, time stopped obeying its usual pace. Sally ordered a caramel latte. Brad ordered black coffee, then changed it to a vanilla latte after she teased him about being too serious for a Saturday morning. He laughed, surprising himself at how natural it felt. They talked about everything. Her internship, his beginnings in tech before he became a household name, her belief that young students in Atlanta deserved better tools, his belief that purpose mattered more than status. The conversation flowed as easily as the music playing overhead, soft jazz. When Brad mentioned that his father used to play old records on Saturday nights, Sally's eyes brightened. "My grandfather was the same, blues and jazz spinning all weekend. He said music tells the truth people try to hide." Brad's smile softened. "Your grandfather sounds wise." Their coffee stretched into a second hour. Then a walk around the block. Then lunch. One date became another, and another, until weekends felt incomplete if they weren't together. Brad found comfort in her presence. She found safety in his steadiness. They discovered a shared love for old-school jazz vinyls. Sally introduced him to Motown classics. Brad introduced her to vintage recordings his father collected. It became their ritual, quiet evenings listening to music, sitting close enough for their shoulders to touch, talking about life without fear of judgment. Over time, their dates shifted from getting to know you to knowing where I fit in your world. And for the first time in years, Brad didn't feel alone in his. For the first time in her life, Sally felt seen deeply, not as an intern, not as a young woman trying to rise, but as someone whose dreams mattered. Their love didn't explode in one moment. It bloomed slowly, gently, unmistakably. Their relationship grew, but the world did not soften for them. Whether they walked through Ponce City Market or took a quiet dinner in Buckhead, the glances followed them. Some were curious. Others were bold, filled with assumptions neither of them deserved. Sally noticed it first. Women Brad's age staring too long. Younger people whispering as they passed. At first she brushed it off. People always found something to talk about. But at a corporate dinner Brad invited her to, the whispers became words. They were seated at a round table with board members and investors. Sally remained polite, poised, graceful. She answered questions about her goals without overstepping. Brad watched her with quiet admiration. Then someone leaned toward Brad with a smirk that wasn't as subtle as he thought. "She's charming, very young. You always had a good eye." The comment sliced through the moment. Sally froze. Brad didn't. He set down his fork with controlled calm and met the man's gaze directly. "She's not here because of her age," Brad said evenly. "She's here because she brings value, and I'm proud of her." The table fell silent. Sally's breath returned slowly, gratitude mixing with an ache she didn't expect. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't embarrass her. He defended her dignity with sincerity, not aggression. Later that night, in the car, she whispered, "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," he replied softly, "I did." For Sally, that moment mattered deeply. She'd been judged before, underestimated before, but never protected so gently. It wasn't the age gap that defined them. It was how they showed up for each other. Sally's church sat on a quiet corner of South Atlanta, a place filled with warm greetings, joyful singing, and elders who prayed over everyone like family. Brad had never been to a small, community-rooted church before. He expected to stand out. He did, but not in the way he feared. When Sally took his hand and led him inside, several heads turned. Not in judgment, but in curiosity. A man wearing a tailored suit usually didn't blend into the congregation of families and lifelong neighbors. But Sally's pastor greeted Brad warmly, her mother hugged him immediately, and her grandmother pressed his hand with a smile that felt like approval. The choir's voices rose, filling the room with warmth Brad hadn't felt in years. He watched Sally sing softly beside him, swaying to the music, her spirit shining brighter than the stained glass windows. After service, people approached him, politely, genuinely. Sally's father shook his hand with firm caution but growing trust. Brad wasn't used to this kind of community, but he loved watching where Sally came from, the roots that shaped her strength. Days later, he invited her into his own world. High-rise offices, boardroom meetings, gala events where the city's wealthiest gathered. Yet Sally never shrank, never changed her tone, never diminished who she was. At one gala, Brad noticed several guests glancing at her in admiration. He felt proud in a way he hadn't expected, not because she fit in, but because she didn't lose herself trying to. They were opposites in lifestyle but aligned in values. And slowly, their worlds stopped clashing and started blending. Introducing Brad to her family felt like walking into another milestone. Sally prepared him for everything: her mother's questions, her father, his stern expression, her grandmother's intuition that missed nothing. Her family had concerns: the age gap, the difference in status, the reality of how the world might treat them. But concern wasn't rejection, it was love expressed through caution. During Sunday dinner, Brad spoke openly about respecting Sally, supporting her goals, and not wanting to overshadow her dreams. Her father studied his words carefully before nodding. By dessert, her mother was asking Brad whether he cooked. Her grandmother told him, "Love my granddaughter right, and you'll never walk alone in this house." Sally's heart softened at the sight, the merging of two circles she loved dearly. When Brad introduced her to his close friends later on, the reactions mirrored her family's. Surprise first, curiosity second, acceptance last. But acceptance did come. Those who truly knew Brad could see he was lighter, happier, when Sally was near. The warmth in his voice, the ease in his posture, the quiet glow he carried. People who loved him learned to love her, and Sally, who once feared not belonging in his world, began to feel welcomed. It happened on a clear evening in late 2025. They were sitting on the rooftop of Brad's home, looking out at Atlanta's skyline, the glowing buildings, the gentle hum of the city, the breeze brushing softly across Sally's shoulders. They had spent the evening listening to jazz vinyls, sharing stories from their childhoods, laughing about awkward teenage moments, talking about futures they never thought they'd allow themselves to imagine. The city lights reflected in Sally's eyes as she looked at him. Something in her chest ached, not from fear, but from certainty. Without planning to say it, the words slipped from her heart. "I love you, Brad." He inhaled sharply, not expecting to hear those words tonight. He turned toward her, his expression softening, his voice low. "Sally, I love you too." It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. It felt earned. Two worlds, two hearts, one quiet moment beneath the same sky, where love finally spoke aloud. And neither of them knew that the next chapter of their lives would change everything they thought they understood about fate. It started quietly, a soft wave of nausea that struck Sally early one morning as she waited for the kettle to boil. She thought it was the late dinner she'd eaten the night before. But when it happened again the next morning, sharper, lingering, she felt something shift inside her. By the end of the week, she noticed she was unusually tired. She'd sit at her desk during her internship and fight the heaviness tugging at her eyelids. Her coworkers asked if she'd been studying late, but she forced a smile and told them she was fine. But she wasn't fine. Not emotionally. When she opened her calendar app one evening, ready to plan her week, she froze. Her period was late. Not by a day, not by two, by nearly a full week. A nervous heat spread through her chest. She sat down on her bed and held her phone tightly. Brad's face was the first thing she imagined, His gentle smile, the warmth in his voice whenever he said her name, the quiet love they had built in the last year. But underneath that memory was fear. What if? She whispered to herself. Her hands trembled. She wasn't careless. She wasn't reckless. She knew her life had order, her plans had meaning. A pregnancy right now felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, not knowing whether she'd fall or fly. Every step that day felt heavier. She couldn't focus. Her thoughts circled the same question like a shadow she couldn't outrun. Could I really be pregnant? Her heart thudded painfully at the possibility, and yet, somewhere deep inside, a flutter of hope existed too. The next morning, Sally bought a test from a corner pharmacy after pacing the aisles longer than necessary. She kept her hoodie up, hoping no one would recognize her, though she knew the cashier wasn't paying her any extra attention. Back home, her hands shook as she read the instructions twice, then again. She set the timer on her phone, placing the test face down on the sink as if looking at it too soon would alter the truth. When the alarm buzzed, her stomach twisted. She flipped it over. 2 bold lines. Clear. Unmistakable. For a full 5 seconds, she didn't move. Her breath escaped in a shaky gasp. Oh God. I'm pregnant. Her knees almost gave way beneath her. She placed a hand on the counter to steady herself as a swirl of emotions crashed into her chest. Fear, wonder, shock, joy she didn't expect, uncertainty she couldn't control. She covered her mouth with both hands, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. She needed to tell Brad. But the weight of that truth pressed down hard. Would he be scared? Would he walk away? Would this change everything they had built? Her fingers hovered over his contact in her phone before she pulled back. She wanted to tell him in person. She needed to see his eyes, hear his voice, feel whatever came next. She paced the apartment, her heart racing. This wasn't a typical weekend. This wasn't a conversation she could soften or prepare him for. A new life was growing inside her. And it belonged to both of them. When Brad arrived later that afternoon, he immediately sensed something was wrong. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him as he studied her face. Sally, talk to me. What's going on? She opened her mouth, but the words tangled at the back of her throat. She walked to the couch and sat down, pressing her palms together to stop them from shaking. Brad followed, kneeling slightly so he could meet her eyes. His voice softened. Did something happen at work, with your family? She shook her head, eyes glistening. It's not that. He waited, patient, steady, the way he always was with her. Finally, she pulled the test from her pocket and placed it in his hand. Brad looked down. The lines stared back at him. He didn't speak. Not for several long, breathless seconds. Sally's voice came out trembling. I took it this morning. I didn't know how to tell you. I'm pregnant, Brad. I'm carrying your child. Her chest tightened as she watched the shock wash over him. His eyes widened, and his fingers clenched slightly around the test, as if it might vanish. Pregnant? He whispered. She nodded, tears slipping free. I'm scared, Brad, but this is real. Her confession hung in the room like fragile glass. One wrong response could shatter everything. Brad sank back onto the couch slowly, the test still in his hand. His breath trembled. I was told this couldn't happen, he murmured, voice unsteady. Years ago. The doctor said the chances were almost zero. A flood of old pain flickered across his expression, the memory of appointments, disappointment. The slow unraveling of a marriage that couldn't survive that heartbreak. He looked at Sally again, truly looked. Her teary eyes, her anxious hands, her vulnerability. You're sure? Yes, she whispered. And you're the only man I've been with. Emotion surged through him so quickly he had to close his eyes. His shoulders shook, not from fear, but from something deeper. This is unbelievable, he breathed. Sally, this is a miracle. He cupped her face with both hands, his thumb brushing her cheek as his voice steadied. I'm not upset. I'm not doubting you. I'm overwhelmed, in the best way. I never thought I'd have this chance. Not again. Not ever. Relief broke through her tears. You're happy? A soft laugh escaped him, raw, emotional. Yes, more than you know. He pulled her into his arms and held her tightly, his breath warm against her shoulder. She felt him tremble again. But this time, with gratitude. For the first time in years, Brad allowed himself to dream of something he once buried. Fatherhood. They sat together on the couch, wrapped in each other's arms. Sally rested her head against Brad's chest, hearing his heartbeat steadying with each passing second. He took her hand gently, tracing slow circles across her palm. "Sally, we're having a baby," he said softly, as if the words themselves were fragile. She closed her eyes, letting the truth settle into her spirit. "Yes, we are." A quiet calm filled the room, not from certainty, but from togetherness. The fear was still there, but it no longer felt like something she had to face alone. Brad kissed her forehead with care. "We'll figure everything out," he said. "Appointments, planning, all of it. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." She nodded, her voice trembling with both love and relief. "I needed to hear that." He intertwined their fingers, lifting her hand to his lips. "You're not doing this by yourself, Sally. This is our journey now." Her tears softened into a smile. Their lives were about to change in ways they couldn't predict, but in that moment, they embraced the impossible miracle that had found them. And for the first time in their relationship, they felt the full weight and beauty of the future forming right before their eyes. Sharing the pregnancy news with their families felt heavier than Sally or Brad expected. They rehearsed how they would say it, how they would soften the surprise, how they would explain the miracle without overwhelming anyone. Yet when the moment came, no amount of preparation eased their nerves. Sally's parents sat together on the living room couch when she broke the news. Her mother gasped, her hand covering her mouth, while her father blinked several times, processing each word carefully. The age gap was still a reality they were learning to navigate, but as their daughter stood before them, anxious, vulnerable, yet glowing with a quiet joy, they saw sincerity, not impulsiveness. Brad stepped in gently. "I'm committed to her. I'm committed to this child. I won't leave her to walk this alone." Her father studied him for a long moment, searching for any sign of dishonesty. He didn't find one. The concern on his face slowly shifted into something calmer. "This is a lot," her father finally said, "but you've been nothing but respectful to her. That counts." Her mother reached for Sally's hand, squeezing it with a mix of shock and soft excitement. "A grandbaby? So soon?" she whispered, tears collecting in her eyes. Brad's closest friends reacted much the same way, stunned at first, but quickly warmed by the joy in his voice. They'd never seen him speak with this kind of hope, not since before his divorce. They knew his history, his heartbreak, the clinic results he never talked about. So when he told them he was going to be a father, disbelief quickly turned into celebration. What surprised Sally most was how naturally both families blended that day. Her grandmother prayed over the baby, Brad bowed his head respectfully beside her, and Sally sat between them all, realizing that love, real love, made room even for surprises. But while their families embraced the news, the outside world wasn't so kind. The gossip started quietly, the way most harmful things do. Sally felt it first in the elevator at her internship. Two co-workers lowered their voices the moment she stepped in, their glances lingering too long on her stomach. She wasn't showing yet, but the whispers had already begun. She moved fast. "You know how rich he is, right? I mean, look at the age difference." She walked out of the building that day with her head high, but the sting followed her. Brad encountered it at work too. Men who thought their tone was subtle, women who thought their comments were clever. One afternoon, as Brad walked into a meeting, he heard two colleagues talking under their breath. "She's half his age. Come on. He should have known better. A man in his position? She planned it. Everyone knows." Brad stopped in the doorway. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He simply looked them in the eye and said, "You're talking about the woman I love. Don't mistake your ignorance for insight." The room went silent. He continued, "This child is a blessing, and anyone who feels the need to speculate about her intentions is telling on themselves, not her." From that day, not a single disrespectful word was spoken near him. The message had been delivered. But even with Brad defending her, the judgment outside their circle hung in the air around Sally. heavy, uninvited, unkind. And that pressure began to plant seeds of doubt deep inside her heart. Sally invited her friend Mia over one weekend, hoping for comfort and normalcy. They sat on her couch, sipping lemonade, talking about work and life, trying to hold on to the familiar. Eventually, the conversation shifted. "So, you're really pregnant," Mia said slowly. Not cruel, not mocking, just cautious. Sally nodded with a small smile. "Yeah. It still feels unreal." Mia hesitated, then asked the question Sally had been avoiding. "Do you think Brad will stay? I mean, he's older, he's successful, and men sometimes panic when life changes like this." Sally's stomach tightened. She knew Mia wasn't trying to hurt her. She was voicing concerns that many people would naturally have. But hearing it aloud made Sally's breath catch. "Why would you ask me that?" Sally whispered. Mia shrugged softly. "I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I've seen the way he looks at you. But people change under pressure. What if he gets scared? What if he thinks this is too much?" The words landed in Sally like a quiet blow. She wanted to defend him. She wanted to say Brad would never leave. But a tiny voice inside her whispered, "What if she's right? What if this miracle feels like a mistake to him?" Sally swallowed hard, nodding even though her heart tightened painfully. After Mia left, Sally sat on the couch alone, tears forming. Her friend didn't mean harm, but the seed had been planted. And seeds, even small ones, grow roots when watered by fear. A week later, Sally was helping Brad organize his office. Papers were scattered everywhere, outdated files mixed with current ones. She tried to put things in order, wanting to feel helpful and connected to his world. While searching for an empty folder, she opened a lower drawer, one she had never touched before. Inside was a white envelope, slightly worn. Curiosity tugged at her. She gently unfolded the letter. Her eyes scanned the words: clinical, cold, absolute, low fertility probability, natural conception unlikely. Her breath hitched. The room blurred slightly. This was the letter he mentioned, the one that defined years of heartbreak, the one that shadowed his first marriage, but holding it in her hands made everything feel different. A question gripped her chest. If he read this so many times, did he ever look at her growing belly and wonder, even for a moment? Did he ever think this child wasn't his? Her fingers trembled as she set the letter back exactly how she found it. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear, sadness, and confusion. The seed of doubt Mia planted suddenly had proof to cling to, or at least, evidence strong. Enough to make her wonder if Brad carried silent questions he was too kind to voice. Sally wiped her eyes quickly, trying to steady her breathing. But nothing about her world felt steady anymore. That night, Sally couldn't pretend. She couldn't smile through the ache in her chest. When Brad came into the bedroom, she sat on the edge of the bed, the folded fertility letter resting beside her. He saw it immediately. His face softened with understanding and regret. "Sally," he began gently. She looked up, her voice trembling. "Brad, the letter says you couldn't have children, so tell me honestly, have you doubted this baby? Have you doubted me?" His heart dropped at the pain in her voice. He walked toward her slowly, kneeling just enough to be eye level. "No, never," he said firmly. "When you told me you were pregnant, I was shocked, yes, but not suspicious. Not for a second." Her tears fell quietly. "People talk. They say I planned this. They say I trapped you. I didn't want to believe any of that mattered. Until I found this." Brad reached for her hands, his touch warm and steady. "That letter isn't a truth about you," he said softly. "It's a chapter from my past, and the only thing it proves now is that something extraordinary happened between us." She searched his eyes. "Then why did you keep it?" His voice dropped. "Because it reminded me of a dream I thought I'd never have again. Not because I doubted you, but because I didn't believe life would ever give me this kind of blessing." Sally's breath wavered. Brad lifted her hand and placed it over her growing belly. "This is our baby," he whispered. "I have never questioned that. I trust you. Completely." Her tears softened, her shoulders eased, and she leaned into him, not out of weakness but out of relief. In that embrace, Every whispered rumor, every careless comment, every seed of doubt melted away. They had been tested. But trust, real trust, held them together. From the moment the pregnancy became real, Brad transformed into a man who guarded every detail of Sally's well-being. He didn't hover, but he stayed close enough that she always felt supported. He attended every doctor's appointment, even the simple checkups. He adjusted his entire work calendar without hesitation, telling his assistant, "Everything else can wait. My family comes first." At their first ultrasound, Sally gripped his hand tightly. The room was quiet, except for the gentle hum of the monitor. When the small heartbeat echoed softly through the speakers, a sound both delicate and powerful, Brad's breath caught. "That's our child," he whispered, his voice breaking. Sally looked at him, the awe in his eyes, the tenderness, the pride, and felt her own heart swell. He wasn't distracted. He wasn't distant. He wasn't overwhelmed. He was present. When her cravings started, Brad made it his mission to get whatever she wanted, no matter the time. One night she mentioned fried pickles jokingly, not expecting anything. 15 minutes later, he walked into the living room holding a warm bag. "You said you wanted some," he said simply. She laughed. "I wasn't serious." "I was," he answered gently. Whenever she woke up anxious, about the baby, about her future, about how drastically her life was changing, Brad sat with her, wrapped an arm around her waist, and whispered calm into the fear. "You're not alone. You'll never be alone in this." And slowly, Sally realized she didn't have to be strong every second. Not when someone had chosen to love her with this much intention. The baby shower planning became an unexpected bridge between two families from different worlds. Sally's mother loved tradition. Brad's mother loved organization. Neither expected to enjoy working with the other, but the moment they sat at the same table with notebooks and swatches, something softened. Sally's mother leaned in. "Now Brad said the theme should be something simple, but we're not having a dull party. This is my first grandbaby." Brad's mother chuckled. "Mine too. And simple doesn't mean boring. It means elegant." By the end of the meeting, both women were laughing, sharing stories of their pregnancies, comparing cravings, and lightly teasing each other about their very different styles. Sally watched them from across the room, hand resting on her belly. "Did you expect them to get along this well?" she asked Brad. He shook his head with a smile. "Not at all. But I'll take it." The blending of their families didn't feel forced. It happened naturally, at dinners, at planning sessions, during small debates about decorations and baby names. Brad's mother admired Sally's strength. Sally's mother respected Brad's steady presence. Their fathers bonded over grilling techniques and sports arguments. What started as shock in Chapter 3 evolved into acceptance, and now into shared joy. And as Sally watched their mothers exchange phone numbers and hug goodbye, she realized this baby wasn't just changing her life. It was bringing two families together in a way no one had imagined. One quiet evening, Brad stood alone in the nursery they had just begun preparing. The walls were still bare, the crib pieces leaned against one another, waiting to be assembled. He placed his hand on one of the wooden panels, feeling its smooth surface. His mind traveled back to the years when he believed this room, this possibility, would never exist for him. He remembered the clinic, the cold consultation room, the expression on the doctor's face just before delivering the result. His ex-wife's sorrow, frustration, and eventual distance. He remembered thinking something in him had failed, not just physically, but emotionally. He stopped hoping after that. He poured everything into work because ambition didn't leave you, didn't judge you, didn't walk away. But now here he was, 49 years old, building a room for his miracle child. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Sally leaning on the doorway, her belly beginning to show beneath her dress. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. He walked to her, resting his hand gently over the curve of her stomach. "I almost gave up on this," he admitted, "on being a father again, on believing it could happen, and now, this little one changed everything." Sally stepped closer. "You didn't give up," she whispered. "Life just waited to bring you here." He kissed her forehead, grateful in a way he couldn't put into words. For the child he thought he'd never have. For the woman who brought hope back into his life. for the future he once thought was permanently out of reach. Pregnancy wasn't just physical for Sally, it reshaped her emotionally too. The changes in her body, the sudden attention, the weight of the future, all of it pressed on her. Sometimes she'd stand in front of the mirror, running her hand over her stomach, and whisper to her reflection, "Am I ready for this?" At 21, she felt young in ways she hadn't before. Young compared to Brad's life experience. Young compared to his wealth and the responsibilities attached to it. One evening, after a long day at her internship, she broke down quietly. Brad found her sitting on the bed, her eyes red. "Talk to me," he said, sitting beside her. She wiped her cheek. "I feel like everyone sees me as a mistake you made, a child carrying another child. I'm scared I'm not enough." Brad didn't hesitate. He took her face in his hands. "Sally, listen to me. You are strong, you are thoughtful, you are intelligent, and you are more than enough for this child and for me." Her tears fell harder as he continued. "You're not here because of an accident. You're here because I love you, and because you make my life better. Don't measure yourself against anyone's expectations. You're building a future with me, not with them." She leaned into him, letting his words sink into the places where doubt had settled. He supported her through every insecurity. He reassured her through every fear. He held her when she felt overwhelmed. Love wasn't loud between them. It was steady. And steady was exactly what she needed. They spent an entire Saturday working on the nursery, not because they had to, but because they wanted to build it together. Brad opened the paint cans while Sally chose the color. A warm, neutral shade that made the room feel soft and hopeful. He insisted on doing the ladder work while she directed from below, laughing every time he asked. "Higher, lower, more left?" She assembled the small dresser slowly, reading the instructions carefully, while he teased her about being more precise than necessary. But to Sally, this wasn't just furniture. It was her child's world forming piece by piece. When they finished setting up the crib, they stepped back to admire it. "It's starting to feel real," she whispered. Brad slipped his arm around her shoulders. "It is real. And it's ours." She placed both hands on her stomach. "I wonder what they'll look like." Brad smiled. "I hope they get your smile. I hope they get your patience." They stood quietly, absorbing the moment. The room looked simple: crib, dresser, soft paint, a rocking chair in the corner, but the meaning behind it was profound. They weren't just preparing for a baby. They were building a life, a home, a future grounded in love, resilience, and a miracle no one saw coming. On a cold November morning, Sally woke up with a sharp twinge low in her belly. At first, she dismissed it as normal late pregnancy discomfort, but when the second wave hit, stronger, deeper, she gripped the side of the bed. "Brad," she whispered. He sat up instantly, eyes wide, already alert. "What's wrong?" Sally took a slow breath, trying not to panic. I think it's time." Brad moved with calm urgency, helping her sit up, supporting her when another contraction tightened through her body. His voice stayed steady even though his heart pounded. "Okay, we'll go to the car. I've already packed the bags. You're not doing any of this without me." The drive to the hospital felt surreal. Streetlights blinked along the roads of Atlanta, and the world outside seemed unusually quiet, as if the city itself paused, aware that something sacred was happening. At the hospital entrance, nurses brought a wheelchair as Brad stayed right beside her, refusing to let go of her hand. Every contraction made her grip tighten, and each time, he leaned close. "I'm right here," he whispered. "I'm not leaving you. You're doing so well." His calmness helped her find strength she didn't know she possessed. By the time they reached the delivery room, the medical team moved swiftly around them, preparing equipment and checking Sally's progress. "She's definitely in active labor," the nurse said. Brad kissed her forehead. "We're going to meet our baby today." Sally breathed through another contraction, tears forming, a mix of pain, fear, and overwhelming anticipation. She wasn't alone. Not for a single second. Brad wouldn't let her be. Hours passed. The contractions intensified. The room became a rhythm of encouragement, breathing, and focused effort. Sally fought through each wave with determination, squeezing Brad's hand as he whispered reassurance. You're the strongest woman I know. You've got this. Just a little longer." When the doctor finally said, "It's time to push," Sally felt both relief and fear wash over her. Brad moved to her side, brushing her hair back gently. "I'm right here. Look at me when it gets too hard." She pushed, cried, clenched her teeth, pushed again. The pain was fierce, but the purpose was greater. Then it happened. A silence. A pause. A breath across the room, followed by the tiniest, sweetest sound. A newborn's cry. Brad's face broke instantly. His shoulders shook, and tears filled his eyes before he could blink them away. He covered his mouth with a trembling hand, overwhelmed. "That's our baby," he whispered, voice breaking completely. Sally collapsed back against the pillows, tears rolling down her cheeks, relief spreading over her entire body. Brad kissed her forehead, his voice thick. "You did it. You brought our child into the world." In that moment, the sound of their baby crying, the warmth of the room, the weight of everything they had survived, love deepened in a way neither of them had ever known. When the nurse placed the baby into Sally's arms, everything in the world seemed to soften, the lights, the noise, even Sally's breathing. She was tiny, warm, wrapped in a soft blanket, eyes blinking slowly as if adjusting to the new world she had arrived in. Brad leaned close, gently placing his hand on their daughter's back. "She's perfect," he whispered. Sally nodded, unable to look away from the little face resting against her chest. "What should we name her?" the nurse asked. Sally looked at Brad. Brad looked at Sally. Almost at the same time, they both breathed the same word. Hope. Because she wasn't just a baby. She was the answer to every doubt, every fear, every moment they thought life had closed a door on them. The nurse wrote the name on the chart with a smile. Hope. A beautiful choice. Sally kissed her daughter's forehead. "Welcome to the world, Hope." Brad placed a hand over both of them, a small family bound by something far greater than circumstance. The nurse approached Brad gently. "Dad, would you like to hold her?" The word dad hit him in a place he hadn't touched in years. He swallowed, nodding as he wiped his face with the back of his hand. Hope was placed into his arms carefully, her tiny body fitting perfectly against his chest. She let out a soft whimper before settling into his warmth. Brad looked down at her, and his breath shuddered. His hands shook, not from fear, but from awe. "I never thought I'd get this moment," he murmured. "You're real. You're really here." Sally watched him, smiling through tears. He lifted his gaze to her. "Thank you," he whispered emotionally. "You gave me the one gift I thought I'd lost forever." He sat in the rocking chair, cradling Hope, rocking gently as though the world needed to slow down just for them. Hope's tiny fingers curled around one of his heart broke open in the best way. He had built companies, fortunes, legacies, but none of it compared to the weight of this child in his arms. This was the dream he buried, the dream he thought had disappeared, the dream that had finally come home. Their first days home were a blur of exhaustion, learning, and overwhelming love. Hope woke every 2 hours, sometimes hungry, sometimes fussy, sometimes just needing warmth. Sally navigated the nursing, the settling, the constant waking with a strength Brad admired more than anything. But he didn't watch from the sidelines. If Sally was feeding her, he was warming blankets. If Sally needed rest, he held Hope against his chest while walking slowly around the bedroom. If Hope cried at 3 a.m., he was already getting up before Sally even swung her legs off the bed. One night, after Hope finally fell asleep on Brad's chest, Sally whispered, "You're incredible." He shook his head softly. "We're incredible. This is our little team." They shared whispered conversations during late-night feedings. They laughed through clumsy diaper changes. They sat together on the couch with Hope asleep between them, marveling at how life could shift so beautifully. Exhaustion didn't divide them. It bonded them. Every moment strengthened what they already knew. Their love wasn't a brief spark. It was steady, growing, rooted, and now, with Hope in their arms, their future felt more complete than either of them ever imagined. In the months after Hope's birth, Brad found himself living inside a new rhythm, one far different from the boardrooms, presentations, and high-stakes deals that once defined him. His mornings no longer began with strategy calls. They began with warming bottles, changing diapers, or swaying a fussy Hope against his chest until she settled. He loved it. He loved her. But the shift wasn't simple. His company needed him. Projects stalled without his direct involvement. Meetings piled up. Emails went unanswered longer than usual. His assistant politely reminded him that several investors were asking for updates. Before Hope, his schedule was airtight, predictable, efficient, controlled. Now, everything felt unpredictable. Brad tried to do both. He would rush from a morning board call to an afternoon pediatric appointment. He'd step away from a presentation to answer a FaceTime from Sally, showing him Hope's new smile. He would stay up late finishing reports because he didn't want to miss bedtime. But the exhaustion crept in. One night, as Hope cried relentlessly, Brad paced the living room, bouncing her in his arms while whispering gentle reassurances. His phone vibrated with messages from work that he ignored completely. Sally walked in and saw the fatigue on his face, the kind he hid behind calmness and a quiet smile. "Brad, you need rest," she whispered. He shook his head. "I need to be here. With both of you. But you can't pour from an empty cup." He stopped walking, staring down at Hope's tiny face. "I thought being a provider was enough, but now, it's not. She needs more than money. She needs time. She needs me." Sally touched his arm. "And you're giving her exactly that." Brad exhaled, a low, emotional release. This was the first time in his life he realized that fatherhood wasn't about being wealthy or powerful. It was about being present, even when it was hard, especially then. And for the first time, he allowed himself to admit he hadn't figured it all out yet. But he was trying. And that mattered. As Hope became a few months old, their life settled into a gentle routine. But outside their home, a louder, uglier noise grew. It began with an online tabloid headline: "Tech billionaire has baby with 21-year-old. Love or opportunism?" Then came more articles, each one layering on assumptions, judgments, and stereotypes. Pictures of Sally leaving the grocery store with Hope were posted and dissected. Social media threads erupted with strangers making comments that cut deeper than she expected. "She's too young. He bought her life. She planned it. She wanted a rich man's child." Some questioned Brad's choices. Others targeted Sally's identity, her background, her age. A few even implied she used the baby to secure wealth. Sally tried to ignore it at first. But ignoring pain doesn't make it disappear. One morning, she scrolled through her phone while Hope napped on her chest. A harsh comment sat boldly on her screen. "He's raising 2 babies, the newborn, and the girl who had her." Her chest tightened. Another comment read, "Give it a year. He'll move on." Her eyes burned. She knew their relationship wasn't defined by strangers. Yet the constant noise chipped away at her confidence little by little. Brad noticed the shift, the quieter tone in her voice, the way she held Hope closer in public, the way she avoided opening social media altogether. "I shouldn't have to explain myself to these people," she whispered one night, voice trembling. "You don't," Brad said, his jaw tight with controlled anger. "They don't know you. They don't know us." But even he couldn't shield her from everything the world decided to throw at them. The pressure reached its breaking point one afternoon. Sally had taken Hope for a walk around the neighborhood when a pair of women near a cafe stopped talking abruptly as she passed. Sally didn't look at them, but she heard every word. "That's her. The young one he knocked up. Poor girl. She probably thinks he'll marry her. She's just a fling with a baby." Her throat tightened. She walked faster, gripping the stroller handle as her vision blurred. By the time she reached home, she rushed inside and broke down in the hallway, covering her mouth so Hope wouldn't wake. Brad found her moments later. "Sally, what's wrong?" His voice softened immediately. She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm trying so hard, Brad, but people don't see me. They just see some girl you picked up. They look at Hope like she's a scandal." Brad stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, holding her as she let out every emotion she had been swallowing. "They don't get to define you," he murmured. "They don't know your heart. They don't know your strength. And they sure don't know our daughter." Sally gripped his shirt tightly. "I don't want Hope to hear these things one day." "She won't," he said firmly. And if she does, she'll hear the truth from us, not anyone else. He then did something he had never done publicly. He released a statement defending Sally, not her age, not her appearance, not her role as a mother, but her character, her integrity, her value. He shut down invasive questions at press events. He refused to entertain gossip during interviews. He made it clear that any disrespect toward her would no longer be tolerated anywhere near him or his company. For the first time, Sally saw a different side of Brad, not the gentle encourager, not the thoughtful partner, but the man who would stand in front of her and face the world when she couldn't. And it changed something in her heart. With everything happening around them, public pressure, Brad's work demands, adjusting to life with hope, their relationship entered a phase neither of them expected. They had to learn each other all over again. Sally learned that Brad sometimes tried to hide his stress, thinking it made him stronger. Brad learned that Sally needed reassurance that she wasn't facing motherhood alone. They sat down one night after putting Hope to sleep, determined to talk openly. Sally took a breath. "I need you to tell me when you're overwhelmed, not disappear into work or silence." Brad nodded. "And I need you to know that you don't have to prove yourself to me. You don't have to pretend to be okay when you're hurting." They talked about boundaries with the media, about expectations as new parents, about how to divide responsibilities without one feeling unsupported. It wasn't an argument. It was two people choosing to grow together. And in that conversation, they realized something essential. Love wasn't just about holding each other during the soft moments. It was about navigating the tough ones with honesty, patience, and commitment. As Brad said quietly while holding her hand, "We're building a family. That means we learn, and relearn, how to love each other as we grow." Despite their progress, one conflict pushed them to the edge. It happened after Brad missed a small but meaningful moment, Hope's first real giggle. Sally had captured it on her phone, excited to show him when he came home. But that day, he returned late, drained, distracted. When she showed him the video, he smiled, but his attention flickered. His tired eyes gave away how overwhelmed he was. Sally felt disappointment wash over her. "You missed it," she whispered. Brad rubbed his forehead. "I know. I'm sorry. It was a long—" "I needed you here today," she cut in, voice shaking. "Not just physically. I needed you to be present." His expression tightened. "I'm trying, Sally. I can't be everywhere at once." "That's not what I'm asking," she snapped. "I'm asking for effort, for attention, for you to understand that this isn't just my moment, it's ours." Brad exhaled sharply, frustration slipping through. "And I'm doing everything I can." For the first time, they stood on opposite sides of a pain neither wanted. Silence filled the room, heavy, emotional. Sally turned away, tears slipping down. "I don't want us to lose ourselves in this." Brad stepped forward, his voice low. "I don't either." He softened, realizing she wasn't attacking him. She was afraid of distance forming between them. He pulled her into his arms. She hesitated. Then, she held him back. "I'm sorry," Brad whispered. "You're right. I need to slow down. I don't want to miss the moments that matter to you, to us." Sally nodded against his chest. "And I'm sorry for snapping. I'm just scared sometimes." "Then let's talk through the fear," he said gently. "Not at each other." That night, they chose love over pride, honesty over silence, unity over distance. It became a turning point, a reminder that even strong relationships require repair, patience, and a willingness to grow together. The argument about missing Hope's first giggle lingered in the air longer than either of them expected. Not as anger, but as a reminder that even love as strong as theirs required care, attention, and intention. That night, after Hope finally slept, they sat together on the living room couch. No raised voices, no defensiveness. Just two tired, honest hearts trying to understand each other better. Sally spoke first. "I wasn't upset about the giggle. I was upset because I felt like work was taking you away from us again. It scared me." Brad nodded slowly, "And I reacted from exhaustion instead of empathy. I didn't hear what you were truly saying." They held hands, the silence gentle rather than tense. "I'm learning," Brad admitted. "Parenthood doesn't come naturally to me the way it does to you. My entire life has been about structure, but this is different." beautiful but different. Sally leaned her head on his shoulder. We're both learning, and we're going to keep learning. He kissed her forehead. Then, let's grow through the moments that challenge us, not run from them. From that night on, they created new habits. Weekly check-ins where they talked openly about stress and joy. Scheduled work boundaries so Brad could be fully present at home. Moments dedicated only to each other, not as parents but as partners. Their communication matured, deepened. Their connection strengthened. Their commitment to each other, already strong, became unshakable. They didn't just fix the conflict. They evolved from it. One quiet afternoon, while Hope napped on Sally's chest, Brad sat beside them, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Do you ever think about how all of this started?" he asked. Sally laughed lightly. "A tech fair, a clumsy falling board, you picking it up before it hit me." "That moment changed everything," he said with quiet wonder. She traced Hope's tiny fingers with her own. "If someone told me then that I'd be here now, with you, with her, I wouldn't have believed it." Brad leaned back, thoughtful. "I spent so many years thinking family wasn't written into my future. I thought that one letter from the clinic decided my whole story. And then we met," Sally said softly. "And then we met," he echoed. They reflected on every step. Their first coffee meeting filled with laughter. The shared jazz nights. The age gap they learned to navigate with trust, not insecurity. The judgment they had endured. The pregnancy that shocked them both. The birth of Hope, who shifted every part of their world. It wasn't perfect, Sally admitted, her eyes warm. But it was real. Brad nodded. "And the real parts? Those are the ones that matter." He took her hand gently, the weight of gratitude resting behind every word. "You gave me direction again, purpose. Not the kind tied to business deals, something deeper." Sally smiled at him. "You gave me safety, and a love I didn't know I deserved yet." In the stillness of that moment, they realized something quietly powerful. They had rewritten each other's lives simply by choosing to stay, to grow, to believe in what they had built. Hope's first celebration wasn't extravagant, but it was heartfelt. Brad's home filled with laughter and overlapping conversations as both families arrived carrying homemade dishes, wrapped gifts, and big smiles. Age, background, and culture blended into a warm, natural harmony. Sally's mother hugged Brad tightly the moment she arrived. "You're doing a wonderful job with her," she said, looking at Hope fondly. Brad smiled. "I'm trying." Brad's mother adored holding Hope, rocking her gently as she whispered stories from his childhood. Sally's grandmother prayed aloud for blessings over the baby, hands resting softly on Hope's back. The families exchanged jokes. The fathers debated sports again. The mothers swapped recipes. Pictures were taken, dozens of them, capturing joy, unity, and a little girl surrounded by love. At one point, Sally stood near the kitchen doorway, watching everyone mingle. Her eyes softened. "It feels like a real family," she whispered. Brad stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "It is a real family." Hope's celebration became more than a milestone for a baby. It became a reminder of how far they had come, and how deeply two worlds could blend when love led the way. As the evening wound down, Brad's mother asked him to say a few words. He normally avoided speeches at family gatherings, but tonight felt different. He cleared his throat, holding Hope in one arm while Sally stood beside him. "Before I say anything," Brad began, "I want to thank both of our families for standing by us, for believing in us." He looked at Sally, his expression tender. "When I met you, I wasn't looking for love. I wasn't even looking for a future. I had convinced myself that certain doors were permanently closed." Sally's eyes glistened. "But you walked into my life with courage, kindness, and a heart I didn't think I deserved. And because of you," he glanced down at Hope, gently touching her cheek, "because of you, I'm holding the one thing I thought life took away." A few people wiped tears. Brad continued, his voice thick with emotion. "This little girl is our miracle, not because of biology, but because she reminded me that life can still surprise you in the most beautiful ways." He turned to Sally. "You gave me more than a child, you gave me hope again. The kind that rebuilds a man from the inside out." Sally leaned into him, her voice soft. We rebuilt each other. Everyone applauded quietly, not loudly, not theatrically, but in a heartfelt way that filled the room with warmth. Hope's celebration became a moment of declaration, of gratitude, of healing, of love reclaimed and rewritten. When the night ended and the house finally quieted, Sally and Brad sat together on the couch, Hope sleeping peacefully between them. Sally whispered, "You know, if someone looked at our story from the outside, they'd assume they knew everything." Brad nodded. But they'd miss the truth. The truth was simple. Love required trust. Growth required forgiveness. Family required intention. Strength required vulnerability. And stereotypes only held power when people surrendered to them. Their love didn't fit a conventional mold, and that was exactly what made it powerful. Sally squeezed his hand. "We did something not everyone understands." "We didn't need them to," Brad replied softly. "We just needed to understand each other." Hope shifted in her sleep, her tiny hand brushing against Sally's arm, a gentle reminder that their story had birthed not only a child, but a new way of seeing the world. A young woman and an older man, two families from different backgrounds. A baby named Hope who bridged every gap. Their journey taught them that love doesn't follow rules created by society. Love follows courage. Love follows truth. Love rewrites what people say is impossible. And as they sat together in the quiet glow of their living room, both of them realized they hadn't just built a family. They had built a future, one rooted in unity, strength, and a love that knew no age.